those really quick. I think are we on? I never know if this actually where it goes. Yeah, we're on. All right. Whoa, this is the illusion. Did I get us? Oh, wait, it's not there yet. Hold on. There it is. All right. Whoa, this is the illusion. Well, Stuart, how you doing, my brother?
Yeah, very good. Kind of almost too much going on in the world right now to keep up with everything, but trying.
Yeah, there's a lot. Well, I've honed in on the name a little bit of our show. It's the Ruffy right now is geopolitical illusions with Stuart J Hooper.
I like it.
That's just to get us going. I think it needs a little bit of tweaking, but it's getting there. So
yeah, I like it. It's a good combo of both of our worlds.
Yes. So I've been I know your eyes are probably on the Ukraine right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay, our thing is just a second. We'll get this dialed in. And I'm full student of the great honkening. So I think we meet somewhere in that. So what's on your mind?
In regards to Ukraine or just more generally?
Well, okay. You said there's a lot going on. So what's your roll call of stuff that maybe people should know that's going on that may not know what's going on?
I think we see Western governments teetering on the brink of collapse in the entire Anglo world, specifically Canada, the United States, the United Kingdom, and Australia, for a number of reasons. Mass protest movements and inflation being the big two. And I think we're in a very dangerous situation where we could see those forces align and try to take us perhaps into Ukraine and distract from all of their current domestic problems, possibly at the expense of World War III. I do not think it's a stretch to say that's possible. Lots of stuff in the academic literature certainly points to this, that domestic leaders use foreign crises to distract from what's going on domestically. You'll hear that on Western mainstream media, but primarily from Western analysts directing that line of thinking at Russia or at North Korea or Iran or these other so-called bad places in the world. But it's very much the same thing in the Western world as well, in a democracy. So yeah, I think we're kind of an important flashpoint. And I think it does almost really come back to inflation is kind of the key cause perhaps of this across the board, because the economy is just spiraling out of control. And I'm not an economist, more of a political economy approach to this sort of thing. So thinking through the political moves that could be played. But in terms of the economic side of things, it's looking like there's not a whole lot that can really be done here to stop this from spiraling continually in this downward direction.
Yeah. Well, that's where I come as a. Have you ever listened to the Pockets of the Future? It's this. It's an interesting YouTube channel, but his basic premise is that there's no way to stop the collapse of this monetary system worldwide. That at this point now they're just trying to do a controlled demolition, and they're trying to put a bunch of balls in play to make it look like it's not their policies that got us here, that it's actually these other situations, and but what's interesting with Pockets of the Future, he's more of a Eastern philosophy meditator guy, but he does this sort of interesting kind of takes about social commentary and whatnot, and very consistent YouTuber. But yeah, his weird thing, because he was coming off pretty strong against, it doesn't matter what any of these protests in Canada are about, because the controllers are just trying to cover their tracks at this point, no matter what. And I think I tend to talk about that a lot, is that's why you got to empower yourself now, is I think it is all, the wheels are going to come off, and you better have the ability to be firm in the in the rule of law within yourself to establish the new terrain moving forward. I think it's gonna, either that or you're gonna fall victim to a warlord.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want to be a victim to my warlordness.
Definitely not. Definitely not.
So I wanted to get, because I've been focused on the truckening, or the great honkening, but I've also been watching out of the corner of my eye Putin. I'm always keeping an eye on Putin, and I noticed yesterday, I was watching his thing talking about Article 5 and NATO and Ukraine, and his straight up being like, I'm going to nuke you guys, and not mincing words about it. And as a dude who observed Vladimir Putin in the sense of an interesting alpha male character, not on the geopolitical level, but just as a dude, the dudeness of him. I've never seen him as pissed as he was. He had a face on that I was like, oh, Vlad's pissed. And he's not mincing words again.
Mm-hmm.
What's your take on?
Let me give a quick shout out to, you mentioned other YouTube channels, to the viewers of this channel who came over and subscribed to my channel, and some of them have jumped in with messages and things of support. I had a few messages from Instagram and stuff like that. So I really appreciate the love from your subscribers coming over and checking out what I'm doing over there. Trying to kick off a YouTube channel, something that I've done on and off over the years, but trying to be consistent with it now, because I think we need these sorts of alternative voices going on in the world when everything is falling apart. Big thanks to everyone there for that. Like you said, I'm kind of in the opposite position of you. So where you've had the full attention on Canada, I've been full attention on Ukraine, and also keeping Canada in the corner of my eye as well. So we can come and talk on that in a bit. I think that would be interesting. I think there's just a number of things to consider with Russia and Ukraine and all this stuff. The idea that if you critique what NATO has been doing, or what the US specifically has been doing in Western and Eastern Europe since the end of the Cold War, that somehow makes you a Russian sympathizer or a Russian agent or a traitor to the West, that is a position that is a complete falsehood. It's completely based on an attempt to misconstrue the facts of the case, and it's completely illegitimate. If you look at this through Russian eyes, you see a problem which essentially comes down to basic, what we would call realist politics, which kind of is talking more about material power, the material balance of power. So who has the most of what, and where do they have the most of it, and how, in terms of the most of something, is it in comparison to what others have. So Russia is looking at the situation in Western and Eastern Europe after 30 years since the end of the Cold War, and claims from the Western world that it would not expand NATO eastward an inch, and has subsequently consumed many former Soviet states into the NATO umbrella, and has continually been trying to push these other countries under the NATO umbrella as well. Ukraine, for instance, I did a video on this last week. There is a NATO liaison office in Ukraine, and there is a section of the Ukrainian government which is primarily trying to liaise with NATO. So even though NATO is not officially involved with Ukraine, Ukraine isn't an official member of the organization, it's been doing a hell of a lot of stuff behind the scenes, which have been trying to set it up as an incoming NATO member for at least probably the past 5 years. Now, most people don't know this. They don't know that there are these plans behind the scenes that are playing out. All you really need to do is just a little bit of searching online, and you can find all this stuff and see the people involved and the plans themselves. And then once you see that, well, it should allow you to think a little bit more critically about this current situation. Do you think Russia hasn't seen all of this stuff that's going on behind the scenes? Hasn't seen the fact that NATO has been trying to alter the domestic government of Ukraine, that Ukraine has been trying to alter its own government to align it with NATO, specifically with NATO military standards, to make its systems interoperable with the NATO alliance? Russia has seen all of this. It has made it very clear on a number of occasions that Ukraine is the red line. And there we go. And yeah, I think it is reaching a boiling point where Putin is turning around and trying to turn the tables, and he's trying to play realist politics now with the Western world. And we discussed this last time. Well, if you want to play in our backyard, we're going to go play in your backyard. This is called spheres of influence. You're probably aware of this term. Some of your audience may not be. It's the idea that if you're the biggest, baddest country in a certain part of the world, well, those type of countries don't like other superpowers encroaching upon their territory. They're the big dog. That's their yard, so to speak, and they want to keep it that way. In the US, this was called the Monroe Doctrine, which said that the entire Western Hemisphere is the essential property of the United States to a degree, at least the ideological property of the United States, where no one else can come in here with any other sorts of ideas about how to run things. There can be nothing that can change how the Western Hemisphere works that might impact the US to a negative degree. And if there is, well, we're going to come in and we're going to crush it and we're going to kick it out, because we're the United States. We're the biggest dog in the Western Hemisphere. We're going to keep it that way by ejecting anyone that tries to come here. Cuban Missile Crisis, excellent test of what happens when that doctrine was violated, an extremely dangerous test as well. We're essentially seeing the same thing in Eastern Europe right now, and we've been seeing it since the end of the Cold War. Yes, Russia was not in a brilliant position at the end of the Cold War, but it was never really truly defeated. It's always had a massive military. It's always had its nuclear weapons. It's always been sitting there as this really large nation, not necessarily a superpower in every aspect, but militarily, yes. And yeah, I think now we're seeing that it's in a position where it's capable of enacting a sphere of influence. And this started in Syria. This is where Russia really stepped up and said, Well, we've got a naval base in Syria. We want to keep that naval base. It's our only the place that we can refuel our submarines in the Mediterranean. It's our only warm water port in the entire world. If the US comes in, overthrows the Syrian government, that means we're going to lose that port inevitably. It's just going to happen. We can't let that happen. And now we're in a position to actually not let that happen. And what did they do? Well, they send special forces, airstrikes, everything, and essentially win the war against the Western-backed rebels, which were being trained in places like Jordan by the British and the American governments, training people that would go into Syria and switch off a hat depending on who they were talking to. I'm a moderate rebel. I'm a ISIS member, depending on who they're talking to, right? And this ends up becoming a terrorist army, takes over half of the Middle East practically. And yeah, I think now we're just seeing what a multipolar world looks like. The US was a unipolar environment for a very long time. The US was the only country in the world that could do things like this. Now we have Russia and we have China. Don't discount China. What China would likely do in a situation like this, probably back Russia. Then you're in a really dangerous situation, because then you're playing the position of Germany in World War II. Let's go and fight the Europeans and let's go and fight the Russians. Well, the Americans are going to say, let's go and fight the Russians and let's go fight the Chinese. That's not going to work. That is not going to work on any conceivable level. We see the Western world couldn't fight 2 wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and win successfully. Are they going to win successfully here? No. So let's respect the spheres of influence. Let's understand the practical reality that we deal with, that there are now these other powerful nations in the world. The US had its day. It squandered what it had. It wasted what it had on these useless expeditions all around the world. And this is the result of that. So yeah, that's kind of my long-winded global overview, I think, of this situation.
Well, I thought that the interesting thing was how he was talking to Macron, right, the other day with about. I thought it was very telling. What he had said was basically on the conventional front, you guys far outmatch us. We're accepting that, and then he was very cagey with this statement that, but as far as our nuclear weapons, we're quite advanced, and we will smoke you. And if you implement Article 5 and put Ukraine in, it's that's it. It's game on, done deal. And again is the one thing that I do sort of find Putin to be such an interesting guy is I don't think he's bluffing on any level. I don't. I think that's the way they've managed to hang on to what they've managed to hang on to for so long. I think if you look at the amount of forays in attempting to destabilize Russia, whether it's embargoes, economic issues with gas and shutting off gas supplies and their limited ports and just resource issues. And coming out of the fall of the Soviet Union, right, when the wall fell, is the breakup of it. I think that the only reason that it hasn't become some sort of backwater is the fact that they're like, this dude's not bluffing. And I think that there's a resolve within Vladimir Putin that he will not back down and he will go through with it, because if he doesn't, all is lost anyhow. I truly look at Putin as being like, dude, he is not messing around. And on that level, I think there seems to be such an interesting thing with Ukraine, because the keys to the castle are in Ukraine. I think Putin knows that if he can strategically get to the paperwork or the files or whatever they are that are in wherever they are over there, he knows, and secure those things, he's got the paperwork on this administration, and he can get it. And I think they're real nervous about that. I think just you look at the situation with Burisma and all of this stuff, and the prosecutors and Hunter and the payola and the whole thing. And the weird thing about Americans is Americans don't mind thievery unless you get caught. When you get caught, that's it. You lose. But if you want to steal and not get caught, and you want to do crime and do whatever you do, just don't get caught. But when you do, you got to go do your penalty lap. And I think Biden knows this, and that administration knows this, that everything's, it's just ironic. It's all sitting in the Ukraine, but I think they've been playing dirty pool over there for a long time. And Putin knows this. You know, it all started with the Crimea stuff and the color revolutions and all of that stuff. So I definitely see that to kind of roll over into what I've been watching with the great truckening and the honkening.
Let me jump in on that couple of things you said there quickly first before you go into that. Yeah, so Putin, Syria, and Crimea. If you were a serious Western diplomat, you would look at those two events and say, I think Russia is playing around. I think they are serious. I think what Putin says he means, and he's going to do it. Then you need to look at well, who is Putin? Who is this guy? Well, he's someone who's been around for a good while now, best part of 20 years, if not longer. Can we deal with him? Yes, if we wanted to. Does he want to deal with us? Yes, for the most part. You should use that lifeline while it exists. There is a scholar, I'll share the screen here, called Stephen Cohen, who we unfortunately lost a couple years ago. I think it's actually might be on the cover of this text, but he's called the most controversial Russian expert in America. That's what he was known as, Stephen Cohen. He writes this book, and he's got a lot of books on Russia. If you really want to understand Russia, Stephen Cohen is going to be your guy. And he explains really clearly, Putin is not a hardliner. If you want to deal with someone worse than Putin, those people exist in Russia. And if you want to go that road, good luck. Because that's
I've always again, as a person who's studied sort of the machismo character that is Putin, right? I find him to be a fascinating character. He seems like a dude. He seems pretty like let's get it. I mean, I know he's tied to his deep state gang and his globalist gang and all that stuff. But at the end of the deal, he seems like a dude who's like is more into the long game of life on planet Earth, of like, look, dude, we all got to live here. We got ours, you got yours, but let's make this happen. And he's not down with the woke. He's into the organic. He's into a lot of the things that anyone who claims to be off the grid in North America would ultimately be like, like that's me. You know, he's that kind of guy. So I think there's a thing where he's like, I think one of the great opportunities we might have missed was the one thing that I did appreciate about the Orange Man was his willingness to go in and work with Putin. And I think Putin's been dying. Not dying is probably the word, but really wants to open a straight strategic alliance with us, because I think Putin underneath the surface understands that the core, what is the American flyover, if you will, as shares a very similar trait to where he wants to move his sort of kind of future primitive up to, and I think we got a lot of common. I think the freak show that is the sort of Russian aspect coincides pretty well with our freak show, and in the middle we got a lot of like legit people. That's why I think that the constant. That's why like I look over it and I go, Russia seems to be one of the last safe harbors on the planet in a weird way. From a weird, lot of land, a lot of places, a lot of room to roam, lot of madness that overrides the system. So I think that's a solid assessment. It's he seems one of the most reasonable people out there, and the reason that he's reasonable is because he means what he says, right? Like, isn't that what we're always looking for? If he tells you he's going to do it, that's why you're right, they didn't mess with him in Syria. The minute he stepped into Syria, everyone backed down. They're like, all right, dude, like maybe he'll let us make the pipeline. And that's all anyone wanted anyhow, right? And he's like, he's a businessman, right? So.
Yeah, so I think Putin and Trump fall into the same category of nationalist elites. And this tends to be in the foreign policy realm. And we talk a lot about elites before, right? This idea of people that are in a position of power and they try to twist and turn society and the political and the economic and the military realms in a direction that is favorable to them. In the foreign policy sense, there tends to be nationalist elites or globalist elites. And these two forces tend to crash together a little. In the US, there are far, far, far more globalist elites than there are nationalists in the foreign policy sense. So yeah, I think you're right. Putin was very happy to see Trump because it was for the first time in a very long time that there'd been a nationalist elite at the head of the country. Trump was absolutely not interested in globalism really on any conceivable level. He didn't do everything that we would have wanted someone of a really nationalist ideology to take in terms of a foreign policy, pulling out from the world, right? Closing some of these military bases and stuff like that. He didn't really do too much, but at least the rhetoric was there. So yeah, that's where I think you get that alignment.
Well, I think the thing that encapsulates, like on the Orange Man level, which sort of was the thing that is where I think was one of the more truthful moments about it, was the his like, let's develop Greenland and let's develop North Korea into tourist destinations. Let's put golf courses there, right? And I've always joked about like, let's put golf courses on the moon, right? So I think that I think everyone tried to make the Orange Man out to be anything but a casino golf course developer. Like, right, for better or worse, I think everyone has gone way too off the deep end to try to label him as some sort of political party. I think he was just a dude who's like, look, man, business is good for me. It's good for you. It's good for everybody. And I think Putin's on that same page too, is like, we want business. And I think the big skeleton in the room where everyone's wagering down is the fact that the fiat currency system that plagues the planet through these central banks and the IMF and all of this stuff has run out of expansion room, and there's no more what Ponzi's left in the Ponzi scheme, is that we're Ponzi'd out. Like we've reached the max. You would need another, I think, overnight exponential growth of I think you would need the population to go from 8 billion to 8 billion to 64 billion overnight for their Ponzi scheme to work, right? Like they can't even take this. So it looks to me that that's what's going on around the planet, and it's dressed. And COVID was the smoke screen with the whole thing, or the coof was to try to get their things in place. Because I kept looking at a couple interesting. For me, the whole thing unraveled when our governor Gavin Newsom came out and said they didn't have enough cotton swabs. And when I heard that, they didn't, what his thing was early on is we don't have enough cotton swabs and reagent to do the testing. And I was like, okay, so these dudes aren't prepared for this. They had to, this was an emergency protocol. I will argue to this day that it was the Orange Man and those dudes who preemptively launched this thing to push the narrative ahead before they could get their pieces into place, the white hat theory. But it seemed to me, because there was just not enough infrastructure in place to do what they needed to do. You know, you look at the QR codes and passports, like the system was not ready for this. Like they scrambled every step of the way and they had to do this thing, but you can see now that they didn't hang on. Their gig is up, but so now it's this thing that seems to be again, they're smart, right? It's very the opposite of the situation that Trudeau's in. Like the world's in the same situation Trudeau's in. Trudeau cannot win. He lost. He needed to do whatever he was going to do within 24 hours of those trucks rolling into Ottawa. He needed to have ringed the city before they got there and shut it down right there on the interstates outside of Ottawa. He saw them coming. He didn't. He hedged his bet that it wasn't gonna catch fire, right? But now that it has, 2 weeks later, he can't do anything because
it's 3 weeks now.
Well, we started this as beginning of the third week, right? So as of today is day 15, and so you bump into this thing where he can't do anything except validate it no matter what. If he comes in billy clubs and gets violent on it, he loses. If he gives into their demands, he loses, dude. If he does nothing, he loses, no matter what. Trudeau and that apparent puppet state has lost. But at the same time, we have all lost too, because the only way we were ever going to beat these puppet states was to sacrifice the supply lines and go, okay, we're gonna cut the supply lines and hold our breath. And where I've thought that this is genius, and again is and I'll say this about COVID round one, when it happened coming out of 2019, and this thing going on in the Great Honkening, both wintertime events, which means spring, get seeds into the ground. You can have, no matter what, even if the system KOs right now and the supply lines fail, everyone can still get a crop in, 2 crops in actually, before winter again. So I think that there's something about that like, yeah, these people have seized the borders. They've shut down the economic trade. The oligarchs, the power players are into it. I think that that's the only way you can explain why they've let the fourth largest, the largest international crossing between Canada and the United States remain closed for a week now, right? But it's because they want it closed. They want to squeeze everybody out. But I think they've misunderstood the Canadians at this point. I don't think they care anymore. I think they're willing to go like grow crops. It's my guess.
Yeah, my comment on Trudeau is I have never seen a more disingenuous, condescending politician ever. I mean, you watch any speech that guy gives, he gives off the worst vibes I've ever seen. He doesn't seem like he believes anything that he says. on any topic, he comes across as someone who's always just saying what he thinks people want to hear. And we kind of had this discussion a couple of weeks ago, right? Remember, I was saying, well, I could come on here and try to be this. Yeah, there you go. Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I was saying I could come on here, right? And I could try and be this. I could have tried to have been the Trump supporting conservative, but it would never have worked because it would have been disingenuous. And you actually can find some of these people online, right? They take these positions and it's clearly they're just trying to do it for the followers that they're going to get. And they make these outlandish statements in favor of these certain things or against certain things purely because they think it's going to get them the attention they want with a particular crowd. I get this vibe from Trudeau whenever he speaks on anything. You look at some politicians, you can see that they genuinely care about some things. There are some things that they do actually care about. Look at someone like a Rand Paul on the right or a Tulsi Gabbard on the left. Although if you say Tulsi Gabbard's on the left, well, immediately people are going to say, well, really, she's on the right. But my point is, two individuals that are clearly genuinely interested in some issues and are actually passionate about them and care about them. Trudeau comes across entirely as someone who's there for all the wrong reasons. And this has exposed that. He has no real principles. He has no real goals of where he wants to go. And now he's stuck. And like you said, he's screwed.
Well, he's an interesting character because he's, him and Macron come out of the same class, of world leaders, right? They're the same sort of smarmy, weak, pathetic, fancy boys that have gotten in these world stages, and they're all Klaus Schwab puppets, right? They all come from that same school. There's something weird about them. They're all a little bit off. There's
something really weird about. Really, I don't know how people can even elect people like that. It's really strange how people even fall for it at all.
Well, I think it's interesting is the Trudeau thing is sort of a nostalgia, caught in there on the nostalgia thing, right? Like, his dad was very popular. He shows up. He's a handsome boy, and he shows up right at woke 30. He's very woke. He carries that woke thing. He has his lisp. He has all of that going on with the floppy hair. He's very skinny jeans and lollipops all day, right? So he fits right into that sensibility up in Canada, right? And I think that it's funny when I look at Canada, that Canada's been a very interesting study, right? Because Canada is basically, up until about 2 weeks ago, has been our anonymous northern neighbor. They've got helicopters, skiing, and a part of it that speaks French. That's about it. Yeah, and some beer and music comes from there, and comedians, right?
But when you almighty moose.
Yeah, but I've, as kind of just observing Canada and being, my father's from Kitchener and Ontario, and having been to Canada a couple times, is Canada has a very sensible thing, which works with a very liberal thing, right? And when, to me, where the dude fully just chopped himself off at the ankles was that the Canadian sensibility of liberal, right, is very much traditional liberal, where being woke is tolerated, if not accepted, because, yeah, do your thing, man. It's Canada, big place, dude. It's cold. If you want to do whatever you want, you're locked in your house most of the year, it's cool. Do your thing. Where the Canadian sensibility, where he obviously does not know his own culture, was the fringe minority thing. Because that, I think, from a sensible liberal perspective, that was bullying. And I think even in Canada, even with its split thing because of the COOF, because it's a woke liberal culture does not actually believes in the tenets of progressiveness, right? And the tenets of progressiveness is bullying is not allowed. I mean, what's going on in America is not progressiveness at all. It's drifted into this authoritarian thing. But like the true liberal concept of progressiveness is kind of libertarian on a certain level of live and let live and do your thing, and we protect each other's rights, and you're allowed to run your freak show, and you're not allowed to condemn everyone because they want to chop off their junk and sew it to their forehead. Like, do your thing. It's okay. And I think that Trudeau just one sentence did it. And that's the joke, is the marginalized thing is I think that got everybody who was middle of the road, like on the streets of like, we're not going to let anybody in our population be bullied. And bravo for them. I have nothing but admiration for the Canadians of how they've come together, because I've been watching it, and it has been a beautiful, beautiful thing to watch, man. And it spread, man. Like, and I see Putin, right? If you look at Putin's eyeball on this stuff, and he's like, uh-oh. I think the Ukrainians are like, uh-oh, too. Like, these lunatics out here will not admit they're wrong. Their population's rising up. They're going to have to shut it down. Who's a good match? Oh, it's us. Like, we're the match. I try thinking Putin's like, no, we don't want to play your game. We'll nuke you. Good for him. I don't have any qualms about at this point. As a dude who absolutely does not support the United States military industrial or the Western world's military industrial complex. If Putin needs to nuke, I don't have any. We as a people, a society of Western world, have not shut it down, and we get everything we deserve. I don't have. It would suck. Like, it would suck because one's heading right here, but good for him. I don't feel bad for us at all if he did it.
Yeah, I think that's something that I've been trying to wrestle with in my head. Whose fault is this really? Is it the people's fault for not doing something sooner? Is it the people's fault for being obsessed with sports and celebrities and all this sort of stuff that we distract ourselves with instead of real issues? Or are the people manipulated and pushed in this position by elites, and therefore you can't really blame them for what has been established at their expense, because they've walked into it blindfolded, essentially? And I'm not really sure where I lie on that question in terms of an answer at this point. But I think there's probably one thing that's to be sure. Nobody alive in the Western world right now has really experienced anything super negative in terms of the end of the world sort of thing. This COVID thing, kind of close to it in terms of restrictions on what you can and can't do, but very different to actual war. And like I'd mentioned before, if you read books on what actually happens in war,
don't want anything to do with it. You wouldn't want, if you had actually read anything about, again, is only illiterate people think that war has any upside to it. Like I understand it on a defensive nature, and I don't know if we've ever.
Same here. I would not put myself in the pacifist camp at all.
No,
but this isn't something it's not something that you play games with.
From my perspective, the only Americans, and I'll speak from North America, the only Americans that have ever had a defensive war would have been the original people that were here. They're the only people that have actually, like, you look at Red Cloud's War, and you look at what the down there, the the gnarly guys, the Comanches and Geronimo and the Apache and all those were like legitimate, like people defending their thing and going on the offensive. I don't know if we truly even understand what defensive societal conflict looks like at this point, because we've always been the aggressor. And it's part of our heritage. You know, I try to talk about that a lot, is like, no, that's the American way. We have been bloodthirsty since we showed up, man. Since Plymouth Rock landed on the people here. And I'm cool with it. I really like, it's just the way it is. Where I trip on it a little bit is, to answer your question about responsibility, is you had the entire Western world willing to sacrifice its children the last 2 years. And if that isn't a harbinger for responsibility, I don't know what is the West was more than willing to abuse their children at their own hands. Parents were willing to sit by and abuse their own children because the state told them to do so. So when I look at the broader implications of what this is the culpability is absolutely on the collective of the West, because they've shown their character by what we've done to our children. I mean, the fact that America as a society isn't rioting on behalf of, or peacefully non-complying on the behalf of the 9 million children that are, and the fact that a state like California can be saying they're going to lift the mandates here on the 15th, but not for school children. Same thing with New York. The fact that the American society is willing to co-sign that level of abuse, and the fact that any parent would sit by and allow that to happen.
I feel that's the title of the book, Co-Signing Abuse.
No,
I'm going to steal that one.
Yeah, because I don't, the scapegoatism's over from my perspective of like growing up now and watching this for 52 years. I'll wind that down 40 years, because I probably started paying attention. The first thing that ever stuck out in my mind when on the thing was the crashing of the helicopters from the embassy rescue. That I remember that distinctly, because I saw the cover of Time at my folks' house.
You mean the Iran one, right?
The Iran one, when Carter tried to rescue the helicopters and they crashed in the desert. And I remember it. Just so distinctly remember it, because I remember sneaking the thing to see the charred bodies of the service members in the wreck. Right. I remember my mom I saw the cover and she wouldn't let me look. So I had to like sneak around and I'd be like, oh gosh, yuck. And that was the beginning of my like awareness of something, was the hostage situation in Iran. And where I like as an American, and most people don't want to hear this, is as a patriot, I'm willing to accept the shadows of the abuse that our patriotism equals. And I think that that's the hubris of the American way, is not taking responsibility for what we've done. Is
one of the craziest things that you'll see, you probably see it, people walk around with the Vietnam vet baseball caps. I mean, that's kind of getting to your point of co-signing the abuse. I mean, I get that what you thought you did was helpful, but with hindsight and historical knowledge and research, maybe it's time to go back.
Vietnam's such an interesting thing. Like, you could definitely in a thing put Vietnam into its own weird box due to the draft. Like, you had the selective service pulling your number in the lottery, and if your number came up and you weren't you were stuck unless you ran to Canada and risked it all. Like most people think that was some like, oh, you just go to Canada up there and escape the thing. Like there was no, they were viewed as traitors. They had to sign an act of Congress to let them back from Canada with like clemency and stuff. Like they weren't viewed favorably legally, the people who went to Canada or escaped from the draft. And the deferment thing was for the wealthy. So if you were some kid from middle America or Oakland, California, or Watts or El Cajon, and your number came up, what are you going to do? What you're sort of screwed. And I think that's where there's a lot of that Vietnam sort of thing, is like those dudes got screwed. And I think that that's that weird thing where like they've had to be like, we went and did what we had to do. And we're proud of it, not because we're proud of it, but because we are, and we own it, and we're cool with it. And apparently the Vietnamese are cool with it too.
No, that's a fair point though. That makes a lot of sense, definitely. But I think then that maybe also then maybe that calls into question though your position then, because then are they really co-signers of the abuse then, or are they, like I said, just being manipulated into this position, forced to do it?
Well, I think when you move it forward a little bit, again, is you look at the co-opting if you look into the what's the one who's the DA up in San Francisco, his dad's one of the you look into the Weather Underground, right? It's very interesting because prior to the Weather Underground and all the bombings and stuff in the 60s and the introduction of the psychedelic drugs, you have a pretty legitimate pushback on the status quo military industrial complex. Like the early part of the Vietnam protesting stuff was really grassroots, salt to the earth, and very well organized. It's not until they have the meeting in, I believe, 69 or 68, where the Weather Underground comes out and goes, we're going hot on this thing. And there was a big conference about it because at that point, they were doing essentially what was going on up at the trunketing was nonviolent civil disobedience, and it was working. Like those Pentagon things that were going on was doing the thing. And then what did they do? They dumped psychedelics. And now we get to see that most of those dudes that came to play the music apparently were status quo players, hence the exposure through Spotify, right? So you look at one of the big Woodstock Spurs, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, that, and the Grateful Dead was another asset. You look at most of these MK Ultra and what was going on in Laurel Canyon with the CIA. You look at the nodes of who Timothy Leary was and whose house he was using. You look at the Esalen Institute and what was going on there. Like the two East Coast, West Coast psychedelic nodes are funded by the elite and the deep state. They drop all the psychedelics in there, they bombard them with the music, and then they decide to go violent with the thing. And I think there was a moment where, I think Kent State was the moment, man, where it's like they turned their guns and they chickened out, man. And they had it all going on. And they were like, and they said, look, dude, we're going to start shooting. Because Kent State wasn't the only university that got shot up that summer. I think there was like 100 of them or something. It was a lot of universities getting shot up by the military. And then you get this thing where they said, go take your goodies and go. Or we're going to kill you. And they should have said, kill us, dude. We're done with. That's where it was, is I think that they could have been hyper successful. I think that the weird thing with Hanoi Jane is an interesting thing, right? And that whole there's a weird space, because you look at you look at who, and this is one of my weird theories. I know I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but this is something I've been observing is who has been the target of most of these things since the 60s. It's been the boomers, every one of them. Who gets smoked by the tech bubble? Boomers. Who gets smoked again by by all of this? Who's the people that are the fall guy for torching our children? It's the boomers. Did the boomers are the target of the thing? And I think it's a metaphysical thing. I think they go, you chickened out right at the moment, and now we're going to abuse you, and we're going to abuse your offspring, and we're going to abuse your grandchildren, and you signed up for it. So you got the boomers right now who have now become the status quo, advocating for the abuse of our children. And to me, that's what it's all about is. But yeah, I know what you're saying. It's a metaphysical question for sure about what's going on here.
Yeah, one of the Italian elite theorists, Robert Michel's, he wrote a book called Political Parties, where he comes out with the iron law of oligarchy and the whole idea of oligarchy, that political parties always become oligarchies. He has a really interesting quote about what happened during World War I with this sort of stuff, and about what the socialists did, right? So did they stand up against their government when the governments turned around and said, hey, we need to go to war. World War I is approaching, right? Where do we go from here? Well, he says the German socialists enthusiastically obeyed the mobilization order issued by the German emperor and believed themselves to be fulfilling a sacred duty, not only from a patriotic point of view, but also from the democratic, considering that they were thus hastening the day of their own final deliverance. So there's this underlying idea that, well, if we jump on board with the war, maybe we'll get what we want at the end of it. So yeah, I think this is just maybe something in the human condition that we're very open to killing one another.
I think that it's like if you get onto it in a very personal space, right? As a person who, I loosely hang on to my affiliation by my location on the planet, right? On spaceship Earth, right? Like I'm an American by default. It's my team. It's who I roll with. Am I going do I identify like that, like to the nth degree? No, like not on that, because again, is underneath it all is the golden rule, right? Do no harm. So I can't co-sign it on that sort of level. Yeah, like I'm part of this system. I have my straw man paperwork that says that I am a property of the United States of America, that I am that corporation that's part of that corporation, and so I have to fight within or act within the corporation I am part of, right? But what frees me from it all is, right, the golden rule: do no harm. And there lies the rub. As a person who uses one of these, right? I do harm, right? I know what the Foxconn factory is. I know enough about this piece of equipment to know that I do harm. I always joke about, my little pickup truck out there is powered with blood, dude. Like, it's not dinosaur bones. It's the bombing, the military industrial complex is bombing and the whole thing. And so I don't have sympathy for this. I have empathy for it because I know that it's no different than me being an alcoholic, right? This is what is the alcoholic we have is coveting of possessions, and we need, and we got to have, and woohoo, and here we are, guaranteed there's dudes helicopter skiing right now don't give two F's about my kids, your future kids, their kids, any of this. They're standing on top of some mountain outside of Valdez, Alaska, getting ready. Woohoo, right? And sure, that's a path, but that's not our path, right? So I don't know. It's very much a personal metaphysical reality, right? Like, so that's what I mean about co-signing it on that. Like, I don't even know if people are aware enough to even understand the concept of that. You know?
Yeah, I don't think they are. I don't think people are aware of too many concepts.
Well, it's that I think that's a lot to do with like how much can you actually, how much can you read and trust, and you get this information in and it's subject to, right, the victor tells the story, and I think that nonfiction writing has changed a lot in the last 20 years. I think you're getting a much more, I think one of the things that's gone on is a much deeper truth with this reckoning of what it is. And again, I can only speak as an American, right? Like what it is to reckon with being an American and what it encompasses, because the ignorance of it all, for example, like I'm in California, right? Like the ignorance of it all would say that like people have no idea about like the history of California, right? Like, and so you get the La Raza perspective of it's conquered land and the Mexican-American War, and we stole it and all that. And it's yeah, we kicked their ass and we got all of this land, but roll that back a little bit and go, well, the Americans didn't, the Americans that came out here didn't do the real damage. It was the Spanish ranchos that established a lot of things. But wait a minute, it wasn't even them. It was the mission system that came before them that killed off all the indigenous people. So when they do this big thing about, like, especially on the West Coast, about the guilt of this isn't your land, and you hear a lot of the Hispanic rhetoric from those people. And I mean that in the way that there's a certain supremacist movement in that La Raza and all that stuff, is they're not innocent either. Like, you go talk to the Chumash, which are barely hanging on. Read Ishi, the last of his tribe. Read Island of the Blue Dolphins. Like, so it's I think that people don't want to face the truths that the human condition is savagery. But what's the savagery for? It's taking other people's trinkets. For what? I don't know yet. Creature comforts, right?
Yep, I think that makes a lot of sense. Definitely.
So yeah, I think we're watching it in like I was listening. I don't know if you go to the video before, like, that I just uploaded. I got it from someone else. It's this woman's speech from New York today. I don't know who she is. She's some gnarly, really powerful Black woman who basically is like, we're at war, dude. Like, get over it and get with it and get going, because, like, and again, the war isn't physical, it's metaphysical, right? And it's about our children. They've put our children on the chopping block. I don't think that people truly understand what it is going on here. This is about the children. This isn't about anything else. Economies. They've said, we're going to take your children and we're going to do funny things with them in front of you if you don't stand up to defend your children. That's what the Canadians are doing. They're like, dude, enough. Not our children. And good for them, because you hear it. It's no longer about mandates anymore up there. It's about their children and their grandchildren, which I think is the interesting change of the narrative.
Yeah, I think we're actually gonna enter into a very interesting week this week, because we've just gone through the last week when there was supposed to be a false flag attack which didn't come to pass. Surprise. Who couldn't have seen that coming? This week, well, again, we've had mainly all of the embassy staff removed from the US embassy now, except the last few really essential individuals. Other Western countries doing the same thing, all of them making these big statements on Friday, which I'm sure that you saw, that Putin is ready to go, and he's even issued the order, something that leaked out to one mainstream journalist, but was quickly rectified at a State Department briefing, where someone said, well, we actually don't think he's issued the order. So yeah, they ruled that one back in quickly. So we have that. Has the order been issued or has it not? We're going to see. The truckers, are they going to succeed, or is something going to happen there? Is Trudeau going to send in the tanks to squash them? Because I think that might be the only option that they have at this point. But I think that one of the best things about the trucker protest, if you genuinely want to have a political protest that has an impact, you do actually need to disrupt society to some degree.
Sure.
People don't want to hear that. But civil disobedience, it's really the only kind of way of actually getting the power structure's attention in a lot of ways. And you see this throughout human history. Gandhi, Martin Luther King, all these different figures, which inspired these movements. I'm sure you've seen it as well.
Let me ask you this: like, how up to date are you with what's going on up there?
Mainly just knowing that they've shut now bridges down between the two sides.
Okay, so the blockade at Colts on the I-15 in Montana has been going on the whole time, dude. That one's pretty next level. Like, that's out in the middle of nowhere, right? And dude, they're not going anywhere. So then they came in like a week ago and shut down the Ambassador Bridge in between Windsor and Detroit. Well, today was huge. Like, today was huge. You had a giant mobilizing in British Columbia that shut down the border. You had another one what is the town called? I think you had 4 major border shutdowns today, including the Ambassador Bridge in Colts. And you had the West Coast beginning to mobilize. You had a giant showing of people in Calgary. Winnipeg was going. Like, the entire country of Canada is showing up to this thing. And
so compare that to what I'm sure you've also seen, the kind of weekend warriors that you'll see occasionally outside of government buildings on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning, and they're screaming literally at an empty building. What does that do? Nothing.
Well, this is where I've been trying to point out that the thing is again, why I do all this stuff is it's about meeting the people, right? So all those, so you have, let's say, a big town like Calgary, right? Let's say even one of these border blockades, they're basically they've turned into socials, right? So you had people that 2 weeks ago were like, whatever, maybe didn't even hear about it. Hear some rumblings about it, start to see what's going on. The rhetoric's getting crazy out there. The Canadians don't like it. They start to realize, like, hey, maybe I need to go see what's going on. So they show up at the street, and then they're like, hey, what's your name? Well, I'm Vern from over here. Yeah, let's go. We're walking down the street, and with, the one in Calgary was giant. Like, it was like 10 minutes of people walk, like, just mass going on. And so all those people have showed up, and they've by energy have changed their realities, right? They went from being in a country that was pretty authoritarian for the last 2 years to suddenly in mass seeing their fellow countrymen out, and they're like, I'm not the only one, and everybody's pretty stoked. Like it's like, and I've been arguing like this interesting point is like it couldn't happen in America because by default Americans are kind of dicks, and there's an aggressiveness to it because of the hubris of the Second Amendment. You look up in Canada, they're polite people that want to be like live and let live and liberal and the whole thing. And so they're out on the street and they're like, well, what are you doing out there? Like, this is unacceptable. Like, and they're like, yeah, you're right. You're right. Yeah. Hey, you know, and I think that the cultural fabric of Canada, we witnessed change today. Like I broadcast twice today about it. I was so like blown away. You had at Colts, you had 110 people on horseback show up, dude. Like the cavalry showed up. You had mounted people on horses in British Columbia. You had just all over Canada. There was just people honking their horns, waving their flags, and something I'm, you know, as a dude who's like into civil disobedience, and I don't think we've ever seen anything like this before. And it's worldwide. It's going on in New Zealand the last couple of days. Canberra in Australia was radical, man. Do you see the photos from there? Mm-hmm. You got the people in Vienna. Dublin had a giant one. Sweden had a giant one. They're all over the planet.
And did you see Amnesty International?
Yes. That's where I wanted to swing the thing to a little bit on the geopolitics is what's going on over in Palestine is unacceptable. Like it's getting the brutality over there right now is, I think, should be a wake up call to everyone of like, this is what we're looking to face if these people get a hold of this situation, right? And Amnesty International finally called out Israel as an apartheid state, and good for them. And that's what you're talking about, right?
No.
Oh, you have a different Amnesty International.
Yeah, they made a statement on Canada.
Oh.
They said what's going on is essentially illegal, unlawful, needs to end. Is stopping people from getting their vital goods and services, and therefore it's a violation of international human rights law and all this sort of stuff. Yeah, so Amnesty International is a very weird organization. I've never studied it in any real depth, but just looking at it from afar, they come out with rulings that are all over the map ideologically. I mean, maybe that's a good thing, but it's also very weird. You'd think
because they labeled Israel as an apartheid state this week, much to the chagrin of. So that's interesting. So Amnesty International said the people standing up against the globalism is a no-go. Mm-hmm. That the globalist trade must continue. Well, I think what we're seeing, why Canada is so interesting, is we're seeing how terrified they are of what it looks like if people literally show up and mingle. Because I watched Windsor Bridge because I'm watching this Red Pill the Masses who does all the accumulated streams. So you're watching all of them at once. And it's like all that's going on is people literally like hanging out, laughing and talking and chit-chatting and like in the thousands at all these various places. And you're like, that's it. That KO'd. Checkmate. Sorry, you're over. Like, because with that, what are you going to do?
It's also combining with this inflation situation, which is doing nothing good for domestic leaders in terms of approval ratings. And they're all starting to see the writing maybe on the wall. Hey, maybe we actually might want to start listening to these people and preventing this from happening. And all of a sudden, I probably don't want to get too far into this on a YouTube stream for various reasons, but the mask science has apparently changed over the past week. Just coincides with this event. I'm sure that's just a coincidence. And yeah, I think we see the it is possible to stand up against these elite classes and to get them shaking somewhat. And this is how you do it on a mass scale.
The danger I see of it again is, and this is where it bumps into like everyone's playing a gnarly game of chicken right now, is the number 2 behind Trudeau, man. She is gnarlier than him. Like they're getting no gifts if they get rid of Trudeau and they don't have anybody on, like a new group of players on deck, right? Like that's where like people, again, I don't think quite register what the real power lies is with. You can do all this and do that, but you better be ready to walk in the door and get into position to run the control grid yourself, or they're just going to swap out a new team and be like, all right, here's a new team, and you won't see it for 10 years, right? It was just like the Orange Man. You know, everybody thought the Orange Man was the greatest thing ever, and then nobody showed up at their the next year at their local city councils and their local thing and established why they put him in office. And 4 years later, like, he just became another failed experiment, just like the progressives have found out with their situation, right? You know, you had, again, the people that have taken the biggest beating in our society is the lefties, dude, because they put all their money on these Rashid Tlaibs and AOCs and Medicare for all, and they have been literally bent over repeatedly about this, and they're so dumb they just won't give up on it, right? You know what are they, the Progressive Caucus? What are they? I forget what AOC is, dude. The Squad, but they're part of the Progressive Caucus, right? And
they're part of the Democratic Party. There's your
well,
problem.
well, again, as the lefty people got, again, this is the same thing that will happen to the Truckistan too, is if you try to go through any of your typical party mainstream, you're going to get absorbed by it, by just procedural realities of it all. And I mean, no one's better to look at than AOC. I mean, she's an actress and a plant and all that stuff, but nuanced observation of what happens to her and Tlaib and this thing is, you realize that the only way they're even allowed to have their say is to cow to the thing, because they really were allowed in as a relief valve to the thing, you know, to keep the one party, two party system in place here in the States.
Yep, exactly right.
You know, I think that's where again, is if the truckers are smart, and I don't know if they are, they will mobilize themselves into a whole new political party up in Canada, and they'll be the convoy party, and they will actually go and get seats in Parliament as the convoy party, and not like that big. Remember, they were like the other week, they're like, oh my God, the Conservatives got rid of their leader. Like, yeah, great, but so what? Most of the Conservatives are on the same team anyhow, man. So it's like American politics. Like, so what, dude? Like, a big Republican wave in 2022 isn't going to do anything if you don't show up on the local level, you know. But we've talked about that before a bunch. Like,
yeah, the big two parties in either, or in fact, or any Western democracy. There's going to be two big parties. I would bet that none of them are going to help you in any of those places. And in fact, Robert Michel's, in his book, Political Parties, that Italian elite theorist, he would say this can happen in any party. Even if you get the trucker party, it will eventually morph into something that is not useful.
well, I think that's the weird thing that I think we're crossing the bridge with as humanity, you know, and I think that tying it all back into like Putin and the Ukraine and all of these things is if you don't take responsibility for yourself, like civically, right? Like civically take responsibility for yourself. Doesn't matter whatever it is you're going to fall victim to somebody who has their own best interest in heart. Because, I look at it from my perspective is like, and I'm invested in my own civics, right? Like I participate, I got to make decisions all day long about what I'm willing to let go. But I have access. I'm not some powerless person. Yeah, I can't get a hold of the puppet in chief, but I can get a hold of my locals, man. And I can move the ball around ever so slightly, but still I have power more so than, and so therefore inadvertently I do affect the bigger outcome as a person who's empowered civically, right? By sheer involvement on that level, I'm closer to affecting a reality with someone like Vladimir Putin and geopolitics than someone who isn't empowered civically. Like that leap from not empowering yourself to actually participating in your own civic reality puts you in the driver's seat, which I think that most people are copping out to the system. Because if you wanted to join a political party, which I don't, you would go and join your local political party and get involved there too. And be like, you look at what Steve Bannon's promoting with taking over the precinct captains. That's a genius move, man. Have you been following what Steve Bannon's up to?
No, I haven't seen anything about that. But I saw one thing about a British situation, though, this past week. So we got the Conservatives and the Labour Party, right? The Conservatives, Boris Johnson, they're in power. Boris Johnson, lots of meetings with Putin, Russian officials, all this sort of stuff, building up the Western position. So the Conservatives in power, he's making these decisions, these moves. What did the leader of the Labour Party come out and do this week? Published an op-ed in The Guardian that said, under my leadership, the Labour Party's commitment to NATO is unwavering. So what do you get? No difference at all between the big two. And that right there is the reason why I ran for Parliament in 2015. Exactly the same situation was playing out.
Well, I think that's what's interesting about it. So Steve Bannon's and what they're doing is because the Republicans are run by the rhinos, essentially, right? What they've realized, and this is where the Democrats, why they can't get anything done over there, is because they're run by the neocons, right? Or the whatever. Yeah, I guess they're neoliberals, whatever they're calling them, whatever they're called nowadays. Is it's all on the precinct level, right? Like again, you have immense power on the local level. So what Bannon's doing is they're going and inserting their people on the local precinct level and having these elections to take out the precinct captains of the Republicans on their local precinct level, so that the old timer, the old guy who's been sitting there as running the Thousand Oaks Republican Party thing is now being challenged for the first time. And that person is basically like how they did it with AOC did with the primary, the whole thing, because they're coming out of the blue. They can round up the votes they need, take out the precinct captain. And then now they've got another node of this nationalist Republican thing in place on the local level. Like that's where they're getting, like the game is changing a little bit as people are realizing that it's all local.
Did you see that there's also there's now a movement to have a convention of the states to amend the Constitution?
Well, I think that
which is very interesting.
Well, it's a dangerous game, because again, who are these people? Because you look at like this guy Dan Crenshaw, man, like that dude is straight globalist New World Order to the core, dude. But he's got his little like yeah, rah rah rah, dude. That dude's a Republican, dude. No, that dude's as scumbaggery as they come. And you look all through. Like they got that dude in Georgia, Tim Scott, right? I think Tim Scott's the dude, the black dude from Georgia. Whatever. I follow him on Instagram. I've seen innumerable pictures of that dude as a Republican standing in classrooms with children with masks on their face, dude. And I go, I don't know what kind of kook you are, but you ain't defending the children, so you're useless to me too. Like for me, it all comes. It's black and white now. You're either for children or you're not. And if you're not for children, you're a globalist enemy, from what I can tell. And I can forgive you and love you, and I don't advocate violence, but that's the defining line in the sand for me, is like, you're either going to step up and protect these children we're ordained by God to do. And I don't care what your spiritual practice is. Our job is always to protect the unprotected. You're a globalist stooge.
Did you see also this past week the Department of Homeland Security's new directive on what constitutes terrorism?
Yeah, me. I'm fully cool with that.
Sowing discord against the government or undermining trust in government.
Don't trust them.
Extremely dangerous.
It's all gotten dangerous because it's funny. I was talking or doing one of my streams, and one of the comments was like, they snuck up, but they didn't sneak up on us. You know this, right? Like they didn't sneak up on us. They literally printed out and published for the public to read exactly what they were up to, that's what I mean about the co-signing thing. Like they didn't not sit there and like, they're not hiding in some like basement doing their thing. They're literally going to giant conventions in the Swiss Alps with helicopters and Learjets.
And publishing things like this in March of 2021. This is the Atlantic Council. This is essentially NATO's intellectual brain. So the Atlantic Council comes up with what NATO is going to do, then NATO blows things up and does it. Published online, you can read the full thing, although you don't need to. Key recommendations. Just scroll down. There's just one on here that you need to read. This is really the only one. Outline a program that would stimulate US corporate investment in Ukraine. This is what's going on here. This is the goal. It's been published online for a year. So yeah.
Well, that's the breadbasket of Europe. I mean, it's all in the Ukraine.
This is called the Hunter Biden special. Urge the completion of the liberalization of energy markets. In other words, no government regulation of energy markets required. Please let Western corporations move into Ukraine immediately. It's all right here. So,
well, that's what's so interesting, where people are like, increase that $500 million a year, dude. Yeah,
this is what Biden should be doing, according to the Atlantic Council. And
well, of course,
this is all playing out.
Here, go back up. What's the picture of the person on the podium? I'm just curious, dude.
I think it's Biden in the Ukrainian parliament.
No, what's the person on? See how there's like a poster?
Oh, this I have no idea.
But no, that's what I'm trying to say. Like that's the thing that like with I guess what I mean by the co-signing and the thing is the population of the West has really turned its back on the obvious plan every one of these adventures and incursions has come laid out in these papers and these council meetings and these group think tanks, and they published them because they want us to, they want to go, hey, this is what we're doing, dude. That's how little they think of us.
And this is promoting stability, all of this, of course. Cooperation in promoting stability.
Well, sure. You know what's fun? I was thinking we should almost do, but it would be like a thing is where I've really, the one game that really has always stuck in me to show how it works is the game of Risk. You ever played Risk?
I've never actually played Risk, but I'm aware of what it is and everything. I think.
Well, you should almost play Risk get together with some Risk players, and you'd probably 4 people would be good. But when you play Risk, you realize that Risk, the game, it's a board game. Back in the day, we did board games. It's all in Risk, and everything is. If you can play Risk, you like Geopolitics makes total sense of what would go on and how it moves and where it is it's all in a board game, like realistically.
Mm-hmm. And do you want to see something on here that's really going to blow your mind?
Yeah, blow it.
So
blow
what
my
is
mind.
Where is all this stuff coming from then? The Full Atlantic Council, right? Who is contributing to this and forming this set of opinions, set of view? I'm pretty sure this is the page.
BlackRock? I don't know.
So you can become a corporate member, right? So this is a published list of corporations which spend at least $250,000 on this every year. Facebook, Chevron, Goldman Sachs, Raytheon Technologies. Need we go on? Global Leadership Circle. So yeah,
Facebook's lowballing. I'm surprised.
So this is essentially kind of like the NASCAR driver with their suit of their sponsors. Yeah. So this is what is determining NATO's foreign policy direction. It's all of these corporations. This is what is pushing this. PayPal, FedEx.
Well, that's where I think again is where like it's almost mind numbing is that it's not a secret what they're up to, and it's right in our face.
Yep.
And, you look at the, with the cyber pandemic and the panopticon and, the looking glass and all of this stuff is it's all right there. And yet the thing that gives me hope and where I see it again is it's very interesting is what's going on in Canada is spirituality. And this is where I think the system has backstopped itself, so to speak, is they know dimensionally speaking, they're limited with their dimensional progress just because they're so concerned with the trinkets, right? The accumulation, that all their plans are like, yeah, we got to sell energy. It's all salesman stuff. It's all at the end of the day, they're just all trying to sell something to somebody, right? Then they need a customer base, and they're very mono with what they're about, and they're sick puppies on the backside, right? So they understand that they're stuck in this lower dimensional realm, and they've tried to trick everybody to disempower themselves to stay here with them because they need us. I think that the human battery thing is legit, but it's metaphysical. They need our human Tesla coilness to stay here. And the minute we rise up, it's not about overthrowing their system. I think that's where for me, that I see that everybody's a little bit off track is we don't need to overthrow their system. We just need to actually like overthrow ourselves. Like, and that's what I see going on up in Canada is people are overthrowing themselves, and they're walking out of their house and they're like, I'm not going to play that game anymore. What am I going to do at the end is I'm just not going to play that game anymore. Yeah, I'm going to go to work on Monday and we're going to do this and I'm going to barbecue and go Winnipeg, hockey team or whatever it is, right? But I think what they've realized is they just don't need to stay here anymore. And that's what the system's afraid of. That's why the system can't harm them right now. That's what I mean. It's the Canadian irony of the thing is where they really blew it is I think they misinterpreted the play. I think if I get to why I find Canada so interesting is I think they had bet that if you look at the countries that are super severe with the lockdowns, they're all Commonwealth countries, right? New Zealand, Australia, Canada, the UK even let up pretty early, but they were pretty in there on that. Well, why is it? They're all pretty liberal. They're pretty this. And I think Canada was a real thing because they figured they could do their thing because they were so liberal and passive. And then they pushed too hard and the Canadians were like, no. And now they're on their heels because the one thing they can't do to the Canadians is to get them to turn violent. It's just not, I don't think it's in the Canadian nature to duke it out with the cops. America, yeah, dude, you couldn't, people would be like ready to duke the cops, and it doesn't matter what side you are down here. We're crazy people down here. The Canadians are like, no. So they've got this metaphysical, like I see it as a metaphysical battle up there. I see it as World War IV going on up there because the Canadian people have said, we're not going to harm you. We're going to hang out here, talk and barbecue and listen and do raves and dance. And we're just not going to move our cars. Now what? And the authoritarians up there are trying to bluff them out because they know, spiritually speaking, the minute they lay a baton on one of these people's heads, the minute they start cracking skulls, they've lost in a bigger way, and they know it. And that's why I think they're real nervous. They're trying to play a long game up there and be like, if we can just keep this blockade in place long enough and get the supply lines to collapse, we might get Canadians to billy club each other, but they don't seem to be wanting that game. It's a fascinating game that's going on up there because it's very much the rule of the universe, right? You're not allowed to harm people who aren't complicit. I mean, who are like aren't complicit. I gotta think about what I just said. You're not allowed to harm people that won't comply, right? Basically, like people that refuse to act violently towards you, like they observe the golden rule, and I think the universe protects them. And I don't know if a lot of people up there in Canada truly understand what they're doing right now. I think they're just doing it. But I think that the power brokers, if Doug Ford's and Trudeau and these people are trying to intimidate him with these fines and this seizures and this and that to get them to fight back. And you hear the resolve, like, arrest us. Oh, like, we got to arrest you? Yeah, we're going to go willingly. Like that. That's the thing. Like they're like all ready to be arrested and go willingly. And they're like, no, you're supposed to scream and fight and kick us. I've been watching it the whole time, and it's beautiful because there's something potent in there. And it's the same thing that to go circle back to Putin. He's resolved. He's not bluffing. And at the end of the day, he's applying the same principle, right? If you do this, it's an attack. You've printed it in your papers. You've got it. He's read all the stuff. He's like, dude, you've got it printed in your stuff, what you're up to. So if you do that, you've printed out that this is an act of aggression. So contractually speaking, you're not in honor, and I'm allowed to nuke you. And I can do that according to the metaphysical rules of these people are all studying this, dude. These globalists, they know what the deep rules of metaphysics are. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I mean, how can you can't really be bored right now. All you need to do is just log in and look at any of this sort of stuff that's going on. But yeah, I think this next week's going to be interesting, maybe worthy of breaking the 2-week schedule. We'll see. Maybe for next weekend.
Well, I think on a level we might have to do an emergency thing at any given moment because
yeah, because
my thinking on well, let's wrap it. Do the last 15. Let's do on the way out. Let's do our predictions. So for the next 7, what do you think's going to occur? Your prediction of looking at the chessboard right now. What do you think we can expect by next Friday? Let's say.
I think well, in both situations, Ukraine.
Just your feel for the general picture on Spaceship Earth. What do you see coming down this week?
I think this next week, they're still going to try and hype up this thing in Ukraine. They're going to try and push Putin over the edge. They're going to try and continue to ramp up this pressure because that's all that this is, pressure. Removing the diplomats, all this sort of stuff. Moving NATO troops around. So I think they're going to try probably one more week of ramping up pressure, just because we see that still today with the Biden-Putin phone call, and Biden's apparently put his foot down and said, well, there'll be a very serious response, right? He's supposedly supposed to be this really authoritative figure, Joe Biden. That's kind of a whole other discussion we won't get into now. And then the trucker situation, I think, again, there's going to be an attempt at escalation, and from the government, that is. I don't think it's going to go well in either case.
It's going to go not well? Well?
Not well.
For who?
Everyone. Yeah, I don't think if it goes over the edge in either of those situations, no one really wins. Yeah, so it kind of is going to depend on who holds the line best. Can you hold the line or can you not? That's really going to be the question of this week.
All right. So I'm coming in so I'm thinking quickie here. I think 1-2 punch in the next 24 hours, 36 hours. I think they're going to try to co-opt the entire Canada thing with some sort of shenanigan at the Super Bowl tomorrow. I think they're going to try to tie it all together, because I've been looking at that and I go, that to me, the Super Bowl thing seems like a psyop to the core. It's a useless target. It doesn't serve any of the convoy objectives. Surrounding Sacramento is a win, right? I've argued that if they wanted to do it in the US, you would do Sacramento and Albany, New York, right? The two big leading the mandate states. So you hear the scuttlebutt about the Super Bowl. I think there's going to be some sort of thing. And I think coming as the Super Bowl's letting out, which would be in the evening, which puts the Ukraine early morning, right? Is that early morning, right? If the evening, that's what, 3 o'clock in the morning there, 4 o'clock in the morning Ukraine time. If it's 8 o'clock West Coast, I think you get false flag, rapid escalation. Both of these things get everybody's attention out where U.S. comes in and they mop it up, because the DHS has indicated that I think the U.S. wants to get in there and get dirty up there at the border. I think that's what they're looking for up in Canada. I think they need some sort of weird thing, and it would be just this weird globalist border skirmish Canadian bacon thing, like in rapid deployment of 36 hours. Chaos at the Super Bowl. We got to go clean up the border. That's an insurrection, blah, blah, blah. How do they do it? They get that going. And then right when that's like, all of a sudden, just big, giant city over there in the Ukraine, rant, Monday morning, an entire just flood of talking heads going, oh my God, the Russians in Canada and the whole thing, because, you know, they've been setting up that too, it's an, you know, that's what that GoFundMe stuff's about. It's like, it's an outside influence and, and this and that. And because you got,
yeah, I hadn't actually considered combining the two events, and I don't think I want to consider combining the two
they're
events
super locked together because the Ukraine's kicked in, right about the same time, because when Canada gets rolling, it flexes on everybody. They all of a sudden start dropping mandates everywhere, right? Because the gig is up. The COOF narrative's falling apart. Everybody's starting to get wise to this HIV thing, dude, and being like, oh my God, dude, what's really going on with that? The doctors are starting to like get real nervous about which side of history they're going to end up on. So the doctors are beginning to speak up. The kids in California are in full revolt, man. Like that's what's going on the West Coast, is that the children pushbacks like huge all of a sudden. And so you have this thing where, like, if they don't nuke it, I don't see how they cannot do something so major sideways to cover their tracks right now. Like, and it has to happen like tonight. Like, I don't think the globalists survive one more day, like with what's going on in the world there, because people are like, especially up in Canada, people are seeing what to do. Like, it's spreading. And it's going to spread down here. There was one in New York today, up to Buffalo. Last I saw, there was something going on up in Erie, Pennsylvania. People are getting wise to like how much power we have non-violently. And the children on the West Coast are leading the way. Like, because Newsom's got to do, they're trying to put this bill through right now in California legislature, SB. Hold on, what is it? It's SB. I gotta get it. I was doing my research on it today. Where is it? SB 1988. What is it? Hold on, I gotta get this just for the just because we don't want to be wrong, right?
Definitely not. But yeah, a situation that combines those two things is nightmarish.
So you have SB it's AB 1993 in California. They just introduced it. AB 1993 is going to put into law mandatory SOS for all employees in the state of California, independent contractors, everybody, by January 1st, 2023. Super draconian when you read it, dude. So the California and these states, they really are trying to, like, and again, is the thing is these mandates aren't legally binding according to Constitution, rule of law, and all this stuff, because, right, anything not granted to us by the Constitution defers to the states, and then we own it all, right? So the states have to legally put this stuff into play to make it a law in the United States. So they're racing to put these mandates turn them into laws, because mandates are again, without law behind them, are totally illegal. So I see there's a bunch of, they need a giant smokescreen right now. Shut everybody up. Nothing would shut everybody up like a couple big giant mushroom clouds in the Eastern Europe, dude. You know, if you're in Poland, man, you got to be a little nervous, dude.
Yeah, Yeah, any country, any of these tiny little countries that thought it was a great idea to join NATO. Well, it's all fun and games until this happens. So yeah, we'll see what happens. It'll be a fun week.
Either that or it's just more slow burn, dude. I don't know. You know, it seems to be escalating pretty quickly though.
Yeah, could also maybe we'll get that stock market crash, which is definitely on the horizon at some point.
Dude, something that the economy's got to give, man. It's I don't know. I seriously, I was talking to California, talking about trying to make it 18 an hour, dude. I was talking to the dude building remodeling the house next door, dude, and we were both like, we don't get how it's still going. He's like, I've never been busier. He's like, people are, and I go, what are they using to remodel their houses with? They're all just racking up credit card debt. There's this weird, it's like this weird American thing. I don't know what it is. And there's jobs open everywhere. Like, bizarro. I don't get how it's working.
No, that bubble, when that pops, that's not going to be fun either. And that is, I think, of all the bubbles that's likely to pop, that is the most likely to pop.
You saw that the Moderna's dudes just have been like dumping their stock the last month.
I did not.
Yeah, like $2 billion worth.
Yeah, I forget what the term is, but it's something to do with the ratio of GDP versus what stocks are worth. And right now, what stocks are worth is way above and beyond actual GDP.
Oh, yeah.
Is not good in terms of an indicator that something is going very wrong.
No, well, that's the weird thing. It's like you even look at like the numbers came out, like we've got the highest inflation in 40 years or something, right? But but the metrics of how they've gauged the inflation have changed over the last 40 years. So like you listen to some of these Dylan Radigans and Gerald Celentes and stuff, and these, like they're claiming that the inflation is like double what they're like. It's more like 15%. I mean, it's shocking, and yet there's a weird, like they're artificially inflating California because I don't see it here. It's I hear about it, but like business as usual on the West Coast, baby. I don't know, dude.
Here we are. This is the world that we unfortunately have to endure.
I'm excited. I'm an optimist. I see nothing but positivity coming forward.
I used to be the ultimate optimist, and I started reading all these books.
Well, again, right. Like that's the thing is they're on the metaphysical plane. Even the books are still trapped by the 3 dimensions and the 5 senses. Like, I think they're still operating in that. I think that's our exit strategy out, is to just lighten our personal loads inside in our hearts and in our thing, and be of service and go be kind. And I think that the portal opens. You've studied history enough of like those who try to hang on to their trinkets get weighted down and get smoked. Those who operate on the spiritual path and move through the thing with elegance and grace and a light load seem to outride these chapters, you know. So I'm gonna take the Viktor Frankl approach, you know, and just we're gonna go through, but it's all up to us. The appreciation for life. I went for this mountain bike ride today, right? On a positive note, on a hopeful note, right? For you. So we were out mountain biking riding today. So I took him up to like where the trails are getting more difficult and rock, and Owl is a very interesting character because he's super cautious, and he wants to be like more daring, but he's super cautious. But once he gets himself acclimatized, like it no longer bothers him, right? So we're getting up into the rocks, and he's got this little rock chute he's got to go down, but he's got to go between this rock and the little side bank, and it's on a hill, and he's sitting there, and we get him all tuned up, and he's been sitting here watching Canada since he's my like sidekick, dude. Like I keep him fully informed. I sit there and he's struggling. We're talking about it and doing the thing. And I go, what's wrong, man? He's like, that rock right there. I go, but you're riding past, you're not riding over the rock. You're riding right through the rocks. He's like, yeah. I go, dude, there is no rock. The rock isn't there. And he's like, okay. And I go, how about you do it for Canada? And he's like, oh, I'm going to do it for Canada, dude. And he just launched into the thing, dude. That's what I mean is like the energy behind what is going on up there is something so I can feel it on the metaphysical level of right, where two or more are gathered, there God is, right? Like that energy of non-compliance, regaining our authority back and coming together with our community is like a ripple that shoots through our realm. Is it powerful enough to disrupt their darkness? I don't know, but like I think we take big giant gulps of it right now and suck it up, and we take that energy and we apply it to all of our people around us, and we do it for Canada, man. Like dude, look, if I wanted to make predictions on the year, I never thought I would look at my son out in the mountain biking trail in 2022 and tell him the way he's going to get through this obstacle on the hill is to do it for Canada, bro. If that isn't the trippiest, weird time we're in, we're doing it for Canada, showing us the way, dude. Mm-hmm. You know, that's a good sign in my book.
Yeah, that's a good one to end on as well, definitely.
Yeah. All right, my brother, dude, I'm super stoked we're able to hang out and talk about the geopolitics and the illusion that it is.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is on many, many, many levels an illusion. But yeah, awesome as always, Hamish. Really good to see you and talk with you.
You too, Stuart. Stay safe, stay beautiful, and learn how to can.
For food.
Yeah. Learn how to can. It's a lot. I'm all about the 1920s, man. Learn how to do that. Get into the pre-Great Depression mode, and then when it happens, you don't care.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah. Right now I'll be living on Christmas candy, which we still got piles of around the house.
Christmas candy, married life, dude. Newlyweds, dude.
Yeah.
I love you, brother. Have a beautiful